Hello and welcome again to another ChangeMakers conversation and reflection on sustainable living, where we focus on talking to people about their early lives and how we might learn from those early lives in helping us to improve the planet and the problems that are there today. Today we're going to be talking quite differently to some of the other episodes to Clive Nightingale. And Clive was born in West Bromwich in the UK, a part of the world that had industry and employment for everyone at that time during the 50s and 60s.
I'm here with Clive Nightingale. And Clive, would you give us an idea maybe of when and where you were born and the sort of background, first of all?
I was born in a hospital in West Bromwich in the West Midlands, but my mother and my father at the time lived with my aunt and uncle. Where we lived with my uncle, at the back of the house and up in the almost like the allotments above, there was a pigsty because the next door neighbour had pigs. My uncle was a gardener as well, but he was he was in the foundry in a factory, so he was really quite a big, strong guy, and he loved gardening. So and I can remember putting the beanstalks up and then going and helping to dig over for the potatoes and everything. So at that time, in 1946, 47, 48, one of the things that was still happening then was rationing from the war. And I remember going down to the bottom of the street to the centre. It wasn't a youth centre; it was a church centre. To go and get with a ration book to go and get the bottles of orange juice. What else was rationed at the time? From what I can remember, we didn't get fruit, bananas, and the things like that. We had to book those in advance. So if we were going to have bananas, my uncle and aunt did a lot of the getting of food. Another point of rationing, what I can remember, is that there was a baker at the bottom of the street, and we used to have to go and stand outside his door, and we were allowed to take whatever was on the book for us to have, whether it was one loaf, two loaves. Milk was also we collected from the baker. But another point is just remembering something, that there was a printer, a company just along the road from us, and they were printers. And we used to go and get from school. We used to go and get old used pieces of paper that we would draw on from the printers because he doesn't want them anymore. So that was how we used to sort of. Myself and my brother was 2 years younger than me, and my sister was 3 years younger than me. So the three of us, we would go down to this printing shop, to get all of our printers. The diet wasn't exotic at all. The diet was, from what I can remember, it was potatoes, bits of meat, sausage, because sausage was made locally, like sausage meat and bacon, all because of pigs up the road from behind us. Yeah, so that was all local. There was nothing extravagant. So you didn't go and get a steak or anything like that. Pies you would have had, that was because pies were very popular. And the reason, if I remember, for the pies, in the shop up around the corner, which was next to the fish and chip shop was there, of course, which is always a fish and chip shop in the Midlands, but next to the fish and chip shop was the butcher, and what I remember there was that the butcher he made his own pies.
I presume then that, as you were saying, that a lot of these things, the pies and sausages, this was all a way of using the cheaper ends of meat that people could afford.
Absolutely, because you weren't that, as I say, it wasn't fillet steak in there, like it was what was left over and put into the pie. The vegetables were really very popular because then my uncle grew his own beans and peas. Cabbage was homegrown, carrots, of course. So all of those sort of things were grown in in the sort of the allotment. It wasn't an allotment really. It was a big long garden at the top of at the back of the house. So it was. We used to call it the allotment because everybody had their garden side by side. Yeah.
Okay. And I presume there were council allotments,
Oh
other
yes,
areas
massive,
as well.
massive. And it was like for because of the type of housing that we were in. It was terraced, you know, and so the behind them it was almost like a Coronation Street look.
Yeah.
You know, so what you had to do if you were looking at in any way of growing your own, you had to get an allotment and go and work on that. When we moved to further down into Tipton with our first house, we had a garden there, but Dad wasn't bothered about the gardening as my uncle was. But anyway, but I started to try and garden and grow things as much as I could. Because I was now, what was I now? I was 9, 10 and 11. I was going to grammar school as well. So it was it was something to do. You know, there's an interest in that, and that was one of the things actually that was interesting from a school, because at the junior school, one of the teachers really put a lot of effort into teaching us about plants and about growing things.
Oh.
You know, like the classic of bring in an egg box, you know, and stick some watercress in the bottom of it. You know, everybody, well, at that time, that's what we did. You know, and grew the watercress, and then you'd eat the watercress. You know, like you
Yeah.
But coming up to the 11 plus, if you remember we had the 11 plus,
Yeah.
and I sat the 11 plus, and with everybody else in the class, and I passed the 11 plus, which is, and there was a potential of me going to King Edward's Boys' Schools, which is in Birmingham, but my mum and dad couldn't afford that because it was, while it wasn't a private school, it was next to a private school. From a teaching point of view in the junior school, it was very comprehensive. I remember so well a lady teacher, and she was a great character, and she had this instrument. I think I'm using the word called Jackie, and Jackie was different at the both ends. At one end, it was smooth. At the other end, it had been broken off. Depending on how naughty you were, governed what end of the stick you got. And this was the fact, you know.
Absolutely.
Hold your hand out. Out comes Jackie on there if you were okay. If it was not at the other end, because of the break off of it, it hurt you.
Yeah.
But again, a key point there was at the end of the O levels. I didn't go on to doing A levels, which would be the equivalent here of the leaving cert. I didn't do that because my family couldn't afford me to go to university. You know, like there was that. We weren't sort of the well-to-do to actually to go and spend time in, well, not just in university, but the accommodation and everything else that goes with it.
My secondary schooling probably wouldn't have happened, but at that time, in the mid-60s, mid to late 60s, Ireland introduced free secondary education. Now, we didn't have, like you had so many, we didn't have sort of grammar schools and all the rest. We just had secondary schools, and the vast majority of them, you were entitled then to go to school, you know. So quite similar in that, you know, and the education was quite academic sort of in that sense as well, yeah.
Yeah, well, my mother worked on the trams. She was a conductor on the trams. My dad was, he worked in a company that made aluminium sheeting. Our first car, we had our first car when I was 9, 9, 10. And do you know, it was a Ford Prefect. It was the Matchbox type, and the number was TOV 125. Will I ever forget that number? No. I couldn't tell you what the number of my last car was.
No.
But TOV 125, I will never forget it.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of us travel. That was the beginning of us getting about a bit. It was so key, you know. And but then what that started was we did go out for a ride. We went to various places, like not far away, but about 3 or 4 miles, 5 or 6 miles away from where we lived, which took us into Dudley and into towards Kingsford, which was not built up at that time. It was all sort of open country. Dad was a fisherman. Dad loved fishing. And we used to go on holidays. I've forgotten this, actually. We used to go on holidays in the car to Bridge North in a caravan. And that was our summer holiday. And give mum and dad the due, we always had a summer holiday. Remember, we hadn't got a television set. And my uncle and aunt were the first ones to get a television set. And my dad refused to go up to their house at Christmas because he'd now got a television set. Said, we're not going up to Christmas. It's like, I don't want to see this television now. Yeah. And I'd seen a television set in a friend's house, a school friend's house, a few years earlier, and watching The Lone Ranger and, you know, like, and these sorts of things. And anyway, around the Midlands, around where we were, and there's some serious industry there, because there was open cast mining. There was major manufacturing. The company that I went to work for when I was 16 made steel pipes and sockets, and all of the things that put pipework together for the gas industry. Again, which is a major recovery. And we had a foundry as well. And one of the jobs that I had was in the works office, where I had to do the stock management. You know,
There was lots of work for both men and women and all of these different factories.
Oh, totally. Here, you know, what I've obviously learned about what's going on here, totally different. Absolutely, totally different. You know, like there was a lot of industry. I'm just thinking now, like my brother-in-law, ex-brother, he's passed away now, but he was a welder.
Right.
And he used to make the company he worked for. They make the cylinders for petrol tankers. You know, the big petrol tankers.
Yeah.
Make those. And welding those. So there was that sort of industry was around where we live, because it's referred to as the Black Country.
Yes.
Right, and there's a Black Country museum. Oh.
So the Black Country, I presume, you know, is that it's named both from the industry? Was there coal mining and or
yes,
you know?
open cast coal mining. There wasn't any pit mining there. So about 20 miles. So Birmingham city centre to Wolverhampton city centre was around that 20 miles. Yeah. Between the two, it was all industrial. Massive. And I'm just thinking again, I think the term unemployed wasn't even there in the late 50s and 60s. Everybody was employed. My mother worked as in a shop, a factory that made clothes, women's clothes, and she was a cutter. She cut out the designs out of the cloth. Yeah. So, you know, like, but again, she made her own clothes. She made stuff for us, you know, like that in the early days, because we couldn't afford. You asked a question earlier on about what did you do from a clothing point of view. Mother made most of them. Yeah, and I remember the first pair of long trousers I had. Yeah, was when I'd started work, and she'd ordered them out of the Littlewoods catalogue. I was just say one pair of shoes.
Yeah.
One pair of shoes. Like I had a pair of football boots, and I was just looking in this Great Bridge thing, you know, the guy who used to repair the football boots, because the studs were leather studs and they were nailed in. There were 3 nails in. Yeah. And what happened when the inside wore down? The nails would come through and they cut your feet. So what do? We cut a shape out of a Weetabix box, cardboard, and you'd put that in, you know, because that was all you could afford to do.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't just go and buy a pair of Puma or anything like that. Come on, you know. I won't say entertainment. For what else did we do? Okay, when we got the car, that was getting about. But as children, yeah, it was we were rarely in the house. You were always out. We were lucky in that there was a park just up the road from us, and Victoria Park. It was a great park. You know, every year used to have a gymkhana, a whole day, which was, you know, and that was a big event, you know. And we had, and the centre pitch had 3 cricket pitches on it, so, and the football pitches were great. So it was a big park, and he had a big pool in it as well, a big lake in there, so for boating. So it was excellent. Now, if you think about that, that would have been, yeah, about 55, 56.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a serious place to have to go to, you know, for kids.
Well, particularly when you think about, like as you described, the sort of landscape, the environment it was industrial and coal mining and open space mightn't have been that, but so to have a large park and swimming and all that sort of stuff is
yeah. So all of that time of getting involved in something like, well, I was involved in scouting here when you know, because I was actually the regional commissioner for Cubs here in Dublin at one point. So that never left me. So going back to the point about what you did from a time when you could really understand it, say from 5 on to the next 15 years, has, and I can't think of any other way to say this actually, Patsy, has formed me.